Well, good morning, and welcome to Wake Up America Ministries. It is September the 11th, 2022, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit, September the 11th, as maybe you would kind of expect us to. But first, let me say this, that most of us that were alive at the time probably remember where we were when we heard the news and how devastated we felt for our country to be attacked in the malicious way that it was, and the death of so many people, 3,000, and I'm sure that number is still climbing today. But we'll talk about that here in just a minute as soon as we get the I guess we're going to go ahead. But anyway, so September the 11th, a day we'll never forget, kind of like many that lived back in the time of World War II, whenever the president came on the radio and announced that Pearl Harbor had been attacked and thousands of sailors had been killed, and how devastated the nation was. And as we were on September the 11th, 2001, and Lord, just watching the news as we were seeing it play out, maybe not the initial attacks with the planes crashing into the building, but how when the buildings collapsed and all of this was live, we were being able to watch it, and how horrific the sight was, and all of that. And so we want to remember today those that died, those that were working in those buildings that day, and the first responders, the firemen, the police officers, and the Port Authority police, and everybody else that was involved in the rescue effort. And even today, we still hear reports of how people that were there, even in the aftermath and the cleanup and all that was taking place, and in the dust and all that stuff that they were inhaling, how many have experienced various health issues, and actually people are today still dying from the effects of what happened on that terrible day. And so today we want to take a moment, and we want to just remember them, the sacrifice, and then of course 20 years of war that have followed that, and the deaths that are connected through our military and other ways of, the fight on terrorism. So anyway, it was 8:45 that morning, and whenever the first plane hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center, and then 13 minutes later, I believe that's what it was, no, 18 minutes later, I'm sorry, the second plane hit the South Tower, and we saw the pictures, the videos of the fire and the smoke and debris that was just raining down on people below. And from these towers, I know the North Tower was 110 stories tall. That's a tall building, and just the disbelief, the amazement. I can't even really properly describe it, I don't think. I mean, what the scene would have been like. And so I was thinking about the message for today, and and the Lord laid it on my heart to talk about this, and what I'm going to share with you today is going to be a little graphic and maybe a little bit disturbing, but there's a purpose. So just be patient with us and stay here with us, and you'll understand whenever we get to the point of the message. You'll understand. So I want you to just try to imagine this morning that you're sitting there on about the 90th floor of the North Tower. I'll get it out here in a second. Of the North Tower, and you're sitting there, you're enjoying the view of the city. It's a beautiful day, and you're looking, and you see an object out in the distance there, and it looks like a jumbo airplane, and you're going, that looks like an airplane. And then in your mind, you're going, it is, and why is it flying so low, and why is it flying in our direction? And then maybe you call a coworker over and say, hey, come look at this. And then you realize within just a matter of seconds that that plane is heading right in your direction and it's not changing course. And you're sitting there maybe looking out the window and you're expecting that plane to change course, but it's not changing course. And then can you imagine that maybe fear begins to rise up in you, go, what in the world is happening? And then by the time you realize probably that the plane's not going to change course, that it's going to hit the building that you're in, and you're looking at it, and it's on eye level with you, that the time of your death is about to arrive within moments because, I mean, it's a jumbo jet with 20,000 gallons of fuel and all that weight and the speed and everything that goes along with the mass of it is about to collide into your office window. And how horrendous that would be, how horrific it would be, but then it happens, and then for those people on those floors, death was probably immediate and quick. I mean, just the destruction, the fire, the flames, and all the smoke, the toxic carpet and fabric and all wiring and all these things that are now on fire because this jet fuel, this jet virtually explodes inside the building. So can you imagine how horrific, and that's not even an adequate word, but it's the only word that really comes to my mind this morning that describes that experience. And then can you imagine, the building may be shaking, maybe for dozens of floors, and people want, what is it? And fire alarm bells are going off, and water sprinklers are starting to maybe spray. And you're, well, what is it? I mean, this is supposed to be one of the world's safest buildings. But here it is, these planes now, and then minutes later, another plane crashes into the other building. But, and maybe you're that person that's standing at the window and you don't really know what's going on in your building yet, on the North Tower, and then you're looking out the window and you see this plane hit the South Tower. Just the disbelief of it all, and then something begins to happen. Maybe the lights begin to flicker. Maybe if you're above where the plane hit the North Tower, you're above that, the smoke starts to drift up, and maybe you start to feel some heat, and then maybe your phone starts going off, or all of a sudden there's breaking news if you have a TV or anything in your building, and you say a plane has hit your building, and you realize if you're seeing those pictures, there's 2 or 3 or 4 floors, however many floors it was, just completely annihilated, and now you're cut off. There's no way for you to escape because the fire is too intense, the smoke is too intense. Obviously, you can't take an elevator. So your only way down is a stairway, and probably very likely blocked. So now here you are, you're on the 110th story of this building, and you have no way out. And you know that the firemen, maybe not at first, you don't realize, you're thinking, well, they can get me, but then as the more it goes on and the more the heat builds, the more the smoke builds, the more things begin, maybe the building, and you starting to hear things crack and screeching sounds and various sounds, how horrible that's got to be as you're experiencing this thing, realizing, I'm not going to survive this situation. Can you imagine being in that smoke? I mean, I've been around burning vehicles before, and just being around that smoke, even for a few seconds, and not even in the thick of the smoke, just being close to it, can actually, literally, because it's very, very toxic, how it just kind of can take your breath. So can you imagine being in a place in this building where you can't escape? And then something begins to happen. Maybe windows are exploding or whatever is taking place, and the building begins to move and shift, and we know what happened. The building collapsed. The Twin Towers, they collapsed. The North Tower went, then the South Tower went. So can you imagine being that person up on those floors above where the plane hit? Now the building is starting to collapse. And we know what happened, that on that day, that there were people, they were desperate. That people were literally jumping out of windows and trying to ride the debris down for dozens of floors, hoping that when they reached impact, that somehow they would survive. Now I'm painting a very, very graphic picture here for you today. Can you imagine that in those minutes, how tormenting that had to be, how much fear had to be in you, and how much, I don't know, I just can't really describe it. I try to close my eyes and I try to think about what I would be thinking or what I would be saying, and hopefully that I wouldn't just be a complete basket case at this point, but hoping that these people had enough presence of mind to know, hey, I'm not gonna survive this thing today, and that they had the presence of mind to say, Lord, maybe I'm not where I need to be. Maybe I've failed you in many ways. Maybe I've never even called on your name, but today I do, and I pray that all of them were able or had time, those that survived the initial impact anyway, to call on the name of the Lord and to be saved. And so you say, well, why are you being so vivid, so graphic with this today? And I don't say this to demean these people, what they went through, or to make light of it in any humorous, comical way. My point is this, that the unimaginable, because we try to imagine it, but we really can't, how unimaginable the torment and all that was going on in the minds of these people, that it must have been for them to go through this and then not to survive. But I can tell you, as horrible as their experience was on that day, and as horrible as anything that we can experience in this life anywhere, that there is something that awaits for you if your name is not written in the Lamb's Book of God, or the Lamb's Book of Life, that is far worse than anything that we humanly can imagine. And I'm going to tell you, in the Old Testament, there's a word, it's called Sheol. And it means the same as it does in the Greek. The Greek word is Hades. And then there's another word in the Greek, it's called Gehenna. And so what does this mean? Well, we call it a place called hell. And hell is not a place that any of us would ever want to go to, or even hopefully even think of going to, or consider it, but yet we don't take the necessary steps to make sure that we're not going to that horrible place. Because, you know, a lot of people, you see, there's a TV show coming on now called The Little Demon, and it's on FX or FXX or whatever it is, and basically it's a mockery of evil. And I guess what it's doing, from what I've read about it, is basically it's suggesting that Satan and the Antichrist and the place called hell is not as bad as what God's Word portrays it to be. So what Satan does is he deceives. But I'm going to give you some hard truth here today. And anyway, Isaiah 14, 9 through 11 gives us a first glimpse of what we're talking about today, this place called hell. And this is 9 through 11. It says, hell from beneath, okay? Well, if everybody on earth pointed down, then everybody would be pointing down to the center of the earth. Okay, that's where hell is located. It's beneath the surface of the earth. It's I don't know how deep exactly it is, but it's pretty deep. But anyway, it says, hell from beneath is moved for thee to meet thee at thy coming. It stirreth up the dead for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth. It hath raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. All they shall speak and say unto thee, art thou also become weak as we? Art thou become like unto us? Thy pomp is brought down to the grave, and the noise of thy vials. The worm is spread under thee, and the worms cover thee. Now that's not a very pleasant thing to imagine. But I want you to take a moment and I want you to try to picture that in your mind's eye. This place called hell. And anyway, it says here, it says that those that are already there will meet you when you come in. And that there is weakness and worms. And when it says thy pomp, it's talking about the pride of a person. That there will be no one in heaven, or excuse me, no one in hell who is prideful. And actually there'll be no one in heaven that's prideful either. But anyway, Revelation 14, 10 and 11, and Revelation 20 and verse 10 gives us another description of hell. And it tells us that it is a place that is full of fire and brimstone. And it describes it as a place of torment day and night, and it lasts forever and ever. So if you are unfortunate enough to go to this place called hell, or Gehenna, the lake of fire, when everything is finally said and done here, if you are unfortunate, there's going to be no relief. There's going to be constant suffering, something that you'll never forget, and something you'll always experience, and no amount of saying, Lord, I'm sorry, I wish I had done things different, no amount of begging or pleading is going to help you in that time. And there's a story in Luke 16, and we're going to flip over there, and it's verse 19 through 31, and I want to take a moment, and I just want to read it, because this is a story now. It's a true story. This is not a parable. We'll say, well, how do you know? Well, because parables don't use proper names. So in this story, the proper name of Lazarus, the beggar, is mentioned. So we know that this is a true account, and these are the words of Jesus. It's in red, so these are his words. And it says, there was a certain rich man which was clothed in purple and fine linen, and fared sumptuously every day. In other words, he had the best life could offer. And there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, which was laid at his gate full of sores. So he didn't have it so good. And desiring to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table, moreover the dogs came and licked his sores. And it came to pass that the beggar died and was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried. It said, and in hell he lift up his eyes, being in torments, and seeth Abraham afar off, and Lazarus in his bosom. It said, and he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus, that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. So we have this other picture of the rich man went to hell, and I'm not saying all rich people are going to hell. That's not what this word is saying. It's just said that this rich man was focused on his wealth and on his good living, that he never took the time to look to the Lord. He never took the time to help Lazarus, who was right outside his main gate, that needed help. He never took the time to help anyone but himself. And our world is full of people like that. But it don't have to be like that. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, this was the response. So we see here that he's in hell, he's being tormented, he's thirsty, he's hot. It said, just dip the tip of your finger in water and cool my tongue. He said, I am tormented in this flame. But this is what Abraham said. He said, but Abraham said, Son, remember that thou in thy lifetime receivest thy good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things. But now he is comforted, and thou art tormented. So, just to reiterate this, the rich man didn't go to hell because he was rich, and the poor man that suffered didn't go to heaven because he was poor. You're only going to make heaven your home if Jesus Christ is Lord of your life. So let's just be clear on that. It said, and beside all this, between us and you, there is a great gulf fixed, so that there which would pass from hence to you cannot, neither can they pass to us that would come from thence. Then he said, I pray thee therefore, Father, this is the rich man speaking from hell, that thou wouldest send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brethren, that he may testify unto them, lest they also come into this place of torment. And Abraham said unto him, they have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. Now we know the rest of the story. That in this, Abraham's response was, hey, if they won't hear the prophets, they're not going to listen to somebody to come back from the dead. So this rich man that went to hell, he's there for all of eternity. And even today, he's still there. He's still suffering. He's still begging. He's still pleading. And nothing can give him relief from the suffering that he is enduring. And neither will anyone else that enters that place. But I want to tell you this, because, hell was not created for mankind. Hell was created for Lucifer, or Satan as we know him today, and the 1/3 of the angels that rebelled against God and tried to overthrow him. That's what hell was created for. But then sin came into the world, and because of sin, the penalty for sin, or the penalty for sin is death, and we're all going to die, but we all have a choice to make as to where we will spend our eternity. And none of us want to spend our eternity in a place that's going to be torment forever, ever, and ever. When we have a better choice to make, where we could go and walk on streets of gold, walk through gates of pearl, that we can spend time every day in the presence of the Lord God Almighty and Jesus Christ, and we'll get to see our loved ones that have preceded us and made it to heaven. So, I ask you today, will you choose a better way? Will you choose Jesus today? Will you let him be Lord of your life? Will you make a conscious choice today to live for him the remainder of your days and to work for him, to work for his kingdom, and live a life in eternity, because not every day here on this earth is going to be a pleasant day. We're going to go through things on this earth. But if we can endure this life, and we can keep Christ first in our life, keep our eyes on him, that we have the hope, that blessed hope of a better life in the next life. And folks, that's all we have for you today. Remember these folks, these families that are still, the military that's still fighting for our freedom, those that have given the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. Remember them today on September the 11th, 21 years after the horrible event that we talked about. Remember them today in your prayers. And remember us too in your prayers, that, the Lord will open doors for us. We can go, we can preach the word, and that we can share the gospel. People's lives will be changed. So we ask you today, share this video. You ain't got to like it, but we do ask you to share it. Be a sowing partner in our ministry that the Lord has given to us. And remember this, Jesus is coming soon. And Lord willing, we'll see you next week.